With the release of the 3DS, there was one game that got everybody pretty excited. Well, okay, there were a lot of games, but for me, I got super excited when I saw the new Kid Icarus trailer. Kid Icarus for the NES was one of my favorite games as a kid, even though at such a young age, it was kinda hard for me to get too far. Either way, it's a fun little game that combines elements from several franchises, but it didn't get a lot of attention originally. It always seemed like, despite Kid Icarus' enjoyable gameplay, people tried to push it off as one of those games that was hard without anything interesting going on. While this opinion has slowly changed over time, especially as the retro enthusiasts have kept the game alive in our minds, it never made sense to me and simply just isn't true. I can't deny that the game is hard, but it's pretty balanced. Nothing seems downright impossible. The platforming is tricky, especially in the up-scrolling levels where the whole screen is essentially a pit, but there are never really any jumps that are goofy or set up to make you fail. You just need to be good at jumping, which is required for most any platformer. The monsters, on the other hand, are actually kinda easy. While some can be annoying and knock your health down a bit, you mostly just need to take your time and be cautious. Plus, there are no weird mechanics like Pit being thrown back when he gets hit to screw with you while you're jumping around. The game is difficult, but I don't feel cheated when I die. The game combines a lot of elements from the other games as well. Always surprised me that people didn't appreciate this more. It starts out like an up-scrolling heavy platformer reminiscent of Metroid, except you can't go back down, or other classic arcade-style games like Ice Climbers. Then it becomes a side-scrolling game more like Mario, and at the end it becomes more like a shoot-'em-up for the final level. But at the base of it all is actually some RPG elements. As you go through the game and keep shooting monsters, you can level up by gaining enough experience. It's pretty cool stuff, and I'll explain how that all works later. And also, you can't deny that the dungeons have a Legend of Zelda feel to them. Okay, I had to attack the misconceptions and get those out of the way first. Usually I try to save my final thoughts for the end, most of the time, but I feel it's just best to get it out of the way now. I really like this game, and I've always felt it was kinda underappreciated, and never understood the negative comments about it. But don't worry, I'll have my own negative comments later. But for now, let's just check out what makes this game tick. Kid Icarus actually has a pretty detailed story behind it. Of course, it's all written in the manual and not in any kind of cutscene, but it is cool that there is a reason behind the madness. In short, Medusa takes over a place called Angel Land and Pit sets out to rescue it. I'd read the whole thing to you, but honestly, I really don't want to. And I didn't get the full budget quote to hire actors to perform the stories, so you're out of luck. As I stated before, you'll be progressing through 4 separate worlds with 3 levels and a fortress in the first 3, with the last one just being a big level before the final boss. You have the underworld, which is up-scrolling the whole way, the overworld, which is side-scrolling, and then the Sky Palace, which is the one that's like a shoot-'em-up. All the fortress levels are the same style, no matter what world you're in. Each level has a good variety of platforms and traps to keep you on your toes. They can be small or large, solid or semi-solid, icy and slippery, moving, or just standard length of blocks. You'll make most of your mistakes over jumping platforms, or ducking on a semi-solid platform to dodge an enemy and you'll fall through. There is a nice variety of enemies as well. Some only appear in certain areas and others you'll see all the time. You'll find creatures like the Mono Eye, the Shimum, which are the snakes you see everywhere, a snowman of all things, this weird night thing called Colin who floats down with something called eel eyes flying around it, sirens, and many more. Of course, you can't forget the Reaper with its little babies freaking out as it spots you. There isn't much else to say about those things. Speaking of that Metroid influence, look, it's a Metroid. Actually, it's called the Kometo, a mysterious flying creature that is theorized to come from another planet. Okay, so yeah, it's a Metroid. There are, of course, special monsters in the fortress levels that you won't see anywhere else. None of them are really all that special, actually. Pretty bland and just there to slowly drain life in a long, confusing dungeon. Of course, though, there's that famous eggplant wizard who, like you probably know, sucks something fierce. Getting their curse and having to go find the cure room is the worst part of the dungeons, but there is a small trick to get by them. First off, their curse doesn't work if you are flashing, and secondly, they throw the eggplants in both long and short arcs. It is easier to dodge them with the long arcs, so leave and re-enter the room until you get a long arc. The bosses, or gatekeepers as they are called in the game, are both interesting and yet really dull. This is where I start getting negative on the game, because there's nothing to these bosses at all. Twin Bellows is the first gatekeeper, and while he shoots fire, it's pretty easy to dodge. It's pretty easy to stand on the ground and just keep firing, wait for him to land, and repeat. He looks cool and menacing with the fire and 2 heads, but there's nothing to him. The second boss is a dragon thing called Hudra. And it's even worse than Twin Bellows. Hudraw just jumps around in and out of the lava. All you need to do is shoot him in the head. Then lastly we have Pandora, which is just a large floating blob with 2 bubbles floating around. Your job is to easily avoid the bubbles and shoot Pandora's big fat open mouth. Piece of cake. Even the final fight with Medusa just has you floating up and down and shooting way too many arrows in the huge eye. It mostly is just about timing and waiting. The occasional snake really gives you no trouble. These bosses aren't much else but tedious. While the break after the difficult fortress is appreciated, the bosses should be more interesting. Also, while the rest of the music is really good for an early NES title, 1986 if you weren't aware, the boss music is really redundant and boring. While it's supposed to create suspense, it just gets really old. But the rest of the themes are really great, and I really like them. Alright, enough about the levels and monsters. Let's talk about our funny little hero Pit, and the weapons and items he gains to fight off Medusa's evil plans. Of course, everyone always thinks his name is Icarus, but no, it is Pit, just for clarification. He uses a bow to fire arrows at his enemies and has wings that don't work, but some nice jumping abilities anyway. Like I mentioned, Pit's power can be upgraded, and this is based off a hidden semi-RPG system. As I stated, as you fight more monsters, you gain more experience, and if you fight enough, one of those empty rooms will have Zeus inside. Zeus at this time presents you with a strength arrow. You start with 1 and collect 4 more to make you stronger. Sometimes though, he will only offer you a challenge, and if you survive, you can pick a magic item. These magic items are flaming arrows, sacred bow, which makes your arrow shoot all the way across the screen, or a protective crystal, which creates a spinning shield. If you don't face the challenge, Zeus calls you a weakling as you leave. You would think Zeus had better things to do and would use his mighty powers to, I don't know, actually just stop Medusa. Pit can also buy items from the market owners scattered about using the hearts he collects from monsters. He can buy angel feathers, which actually makes his wings work, and he can fly for a short time, water of life, which replenishes health, and you can buy it in a bottle, which will replenish his life once it gets empty. And if you buy a barrel, you can hold many bottles. In the dungeons, you can also buy a torch and pencil, which marks your map if you find it in the dungeon. There's also the black market owner and the credit card, but I suggest not bothering with either of those. Seriously, you just don't need to. One item I didn't mention is the hammer. This item can be either bought or found in levels by picking up a harp, which turns the monsters into hammers. The hammers are used in dungeons only to do one thing: release other angels from their stone state. Once you do this, the angels come and help you fight the gatekeeper. While cool, they aren't exactly useful, as one hit kills them. Then you'll collect the 3 sacred treasures once you defeat each gatekeeper. The mirror shield, light arrows, and wings of Pegasus are all used in the final level only. The wings are what makes Pit fly at the end, and the mirror shield protects you from Medusa's eye blasts. And I shouldn't need to explain what you use arrows for. You can also collect items by finding treasure rooms. You can shoot as many pots open as you want and grab all the items as long as you don't find the little god of poverty. If you do, he takes all the treasures away. There is a pattern for these rooms, but I won't make it that easy for you. There are also the rooms filled with the Spec Nose, which can get you a lot of large hearts if you want to mess with them. So that is Kid Icarus. Ups and downs, it is, or more was, an often overlooked game that I'm glad to finally see is getting a sequel. No, the Game Boy game doesn't count. It's really the same game, just on Game Boy. But this was one of my favorite games on the NES, and one of my most played. And if you've never tried it or given a full try, you really need to. It's a lot deeper of a game than it seems at first glance. So go check it out, and I'll see you next time!